My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old. Last year, I spent 12 months saving $15,000 to surprise my parents with a luxury Hawaiian vacation for their 30th anniversary. I arranged everything: oceanfront suite, private sunset dinner, helicopter tour, their dream trip down to the smallest detail. When I presented them with the gift, they seemed thrilled until my mother asked one crushing question: "Would you mind if we take your sister Rachel instead of you?" I was stunned, but reluctantly agreed. The morning they left, I tracked their flight online. Once I confirmed they were airborne, I methodically canceled every reservation. Before I tell you how I went from generous daughter to family outcast, overnight drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever felt like your best was never good enough for your family. Growing up in our modest suburban home in Pennsylvania, I learned early that my place in the family had specific parameters. I was the responsible one, the achiever, the self-sufficient child who never caused problems. My sister Rachel, 2 years younger, occupied a different position entirely. She was the family darling, the one whose feelings were always prioritized, whose needs always came first. This dynamic wasn't established through any single dramatic incident, but through thousands of small moments that accumulated over years. When I brought home straight A's, my report card would receive a cursory glance and a distracted, "Good job, Emily." When Rachel managed to pull C's and B's, my parents would celebrate with ice cream outings, praising her improvement and effort. My academic achievements were expected. Her mediocre performance was celebrated. Our childhood bedrooms told the story clearly. Mine was functional and plain, while Rachel's was regularly redecorated to match her changing interests. When I qualified for state-level piano competitions after years of dedicated practice, my parents often had conflicts that prevented attendance. They never missed a single one of Rachel's soccer games, despite her position as perpetual bench warmer. "Rachel is more sensitive," my mother would explain when I questioned these disparities. "She needs more encouragement." The unspoken message was clear: I was strong enough to handle less, to need less, to expect less. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, I threw myself into building independence. While other teenagers worried about social status, I worked part-time jobs, maintained perfect grades, and secured a full academic scholarship to a prestigious university. My parents attended my high school graduation, but left immediately after the ceremony to attend Rachel's softball game, missing the honors luncheon where I received multiple awards. College provided blessed distance from family dynamics. I double majored in finance and economics, graduating with honors while working throughout to cover living expenses. My first job offer came from a respected financial firm in Philadelphia, offering an entry-level position with clear advancement potential. Meanwhile, Rachel's path followed a predictable pattern. She attempted 3 different college majors at the state university, completing none of them. My parents covered her tuition, housing, and spending money through each false start, always with understanding explanations about her finding herself. When she decided college wasn't her thing, they supported her through a series of short-lived jobs and creative endeavors. Her pottery shop that closed after 6 months, her photography business that never got beyond an expensive camera purchase, her brief stint as a yoga instructor. Each of Rachel's failures became opportunities for family rallying, with financial and emotional resources diverted to support her next attempt. Each of my successes was acknowledged with brief congratulations before conversation returned to Rachel's needs. Despite this pattern, I maintained hope that achievement would eventually earn recognition. My career progressed rapidly, with promotions taking me from financial analyst to senior advisor to eventually executive-level management by my early 30s. My income grew substantially, allowing me to purchase a comfortable condominium in the city and build solid investments. As my financial situation improved, my parents began facing the reality of retirement with inadequate savings. Their modest pensions barely covered basic expenses, creating ongoing financial stress. Without being asked, I established automatic monthly transfers to supplement their income, not large sums, but enough to ease their burden and allow small comforts. Rachel, now in her 30s like me, but with a spotty employment history, continued receiving parental support. When she couldn't make rent, they covered it. When her car needed repairs, they paid the mechanic. Their own financial struggles never seemed to affect their willingness to rescue Rachel from consequences. My financial contributions to my parents were accepted without much acknowledgement, just as my achievements always had been. Occasional thanks felt perfunctory, my support seemingly viewed as an obligation rather than generosity. I continued giving nonetheless, hoping that reliability and responsibility would eventually be valued. When my parents' 30th wedding anniversary approached, I saw an opportunity to finally make a gesture too significant to be overlooked. During a Sunday dinner at their home, several months before the date, I carefully brought up the topic of dream vacations. If you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be? I asked casually as we finished dessert. My mother sighed wistfully. Hawaii without a question. We've always wanted to see those beautiful beaches. My father nodded in agreement. We had a Hawaii fund when we were first married, but then the kids came along and the house needed a new roof, and somehow 30 years went by. We had a magazine full of pictures, my mother added. I used to tell your father we'd go for our 25th anniversary, but by then we were helping Rachel with the down payment on her condo. The condo Rachel had sold at a loss 6 months later, I remembered silently. That conversation sparked a plan. I would give them the Hawaiian vacation they had always dreamed of but never prioritized. Not just any trip, but the luxury experience they deserved after 30 years of marriage. Perhaps this grand gesture would finally earn the recognition and appreciation I still hungered for despite my adult independence. Over the next year, I built my Hawaii fund. I worked additional consulting hours on weekends, canceled my own planned vacation to Portugal, and redirected investment income toward the growing travel account. While I maintained my monthly support to my parents, I scaled back my own discretionary spending to reach the target amount faster. By the time their anniversary approached, I had saved $15,000 dedicated to creating their perfect Hawaiian experience. The amount would have been larger, but 3 months before their anniversary, Rachel needed emergency dental work not covered by insurance, and my parents called asking if I could help out just this once. I transferred $2,000 immediately, despite knowing it would affect the Hawaii budget. The planning process became a second job. I researched Hawaiian resorts extensively, eventually selecting an exclusive property on Maui's western shore, known for catering to anniversary celebrations. I booked a premium oceanfront suite with a private lanai and spectacular sunset views. I arranged a private dinner on the beach with champagne service and personalized menu. I secured spots on the island's most exclusive helicopter tour, reserved tickets to an authentic luau, and arranged a rental car that would let them explore the island comfortably. Every detail was considered, from airport transfers to a professional photography session to capture their anniversary memories. I even contacted their friends secretly to collect messages and photos for a surprise anniversary memory book that would be waiting in their suite upon arrival. As the date approached, my excitement grew. Finally, I had created something too special to be dismissed, too thoughtful to be taken for granted. This would be the moment when my parents would see me, truly see me, and recognize the love behind my efforts. I scheduled a day off work to drive to their home and present the gift in person, practicing my announcement speech repeatedly during the 2-hour drive. The presentation folder in the passenger seat contained all the details of their dream vacation, including spending money in a special account I had established for souvenirs and extra experiences. Their delight would be worth every sacrifice, every extra hour worked. At last, I would receive the validation I had sought for decades. I had no idea that within hours this dream would shatter, setting in motion a family crisis that would force me to confront our dysfunctional patterns once and for all. I arrived at my parents' modest home with butterflies in my stomach and the glossy presentation folder tucked under my arm. Mom answered the door in her favorite apron, clearly in the middle of preparing dinner. "Emily, you're early. I thought you said 6 o'clock. She gave me a quick hug while checking something on the stove. "It's 6 now, Mom," I said, checking my watch. "Oh, well, dinner's running a bit behind. Your father's watching the game and Rachel should be here any minute." I hadn't known Rachel would be joining us, but I should have expected it. No family gathering was complete without Rachel, regardless of the occasion. "I thought this was just a regular dinner with you and Dad," I said, trying to keep disappointment from my voice. "Rachel's been having such a hard time since Kyle broke up with her. I thought family dinner would cheer her up." Mom stirred something that smelled like her signature beef stew. "You don't mind, do you?" Of course I minded. This was supposed to be my special moment with them, presenting a gift I had sacrificed and planned for an entire year. But as always, I swallowed my feelings and nodded. "No problem. How is she doing?" This launched Mom into a detailed account of Rachel's emotional state following her breakup with Kyle, her third serious relationship to end in 2 years. I listened politely while helping set the table, the presentation folder now hidden in my tote bag. Rachel arrived 30 minutes late, entering without knocking, as was her habit. She looked perfectly put together despite her supposedly devastated emotional state, wearing new clothes I recognized from high-end brands, and carrying a designer purse I knew she couldn't afford on her part-time barista salary. "Emmy!" she squealed, using the childhood nickname I had repeatedly asked her not to use. "I didn't know you'd be here too." Dinner proceeded as family dinners always did. Rachel dominated the conversation with dramatic stories about her breakup, her difficult boss, and her plans to potentially start a candle-making business. My parents listened with rapt attention, asking concerned questions and offering encouragement about her entrepreneurial spirit. When I mentioned my recent promotion at work, which included a substantial raise and expanded team, my father nodded distractedly and said, "That's nice, Emily," before turning back to Rachel's explanation of different candle wax types. After dinner, while Mom served coffee and Dad's favorite apple pie, I decided it was time. The presentation folder felt heavy in my hands as I cleared my throat. "Mom, Dad, I actually came tonight because I have something special for you." I placed the elegant folder on the table. "This year marks your 30th wedding anniversary, and I wanted to do something to celebrate your marriage and everything you've built together." This caught their attention, curious expressions replacing their usual distraction when I spoke. Rachel looked up from her phone, suddenly interested. "Inside this folder," I continued, my heart pounding with anticipation, "is something you've wanted for 30 years but never been able to do for yourselves." I slid the folder toward them. My father opened it slowly, removing the contents, the detailed itinerary confirmation documents, brochures from the luxury resort, and photos of the oceanfront suite. "What is this?" my mother asked, scanning the papers with widening eyes. "It's a 2-week luxury vacation in Maui," I explained, unable to keep excitement from my voice. "I've been saving and planning for the past year to give you the Hawaiian vacation you've always dreamed about." I detailed the accommodation's special experiences and thoughtful touches I had arranged. As I spoke, their expressions shifted from confusion to shock to what I desperately hoped was appreciation. "The trip is scheduled for next month, May 15th to 29th, which I know is your actual anniversary date. I've already spoken with your doctors about your prescriptions for travel, and Dad's golf buddy Jim said he'd water the plants and check the mail while you're away." A heavy silence followed my announcement. My parents exchanged an unreadable glance before my mother spoke. "Emily, this is incredibly generous, but May 15th, that's only 3 weeks away." "Yes," I confirmed, slightly confused by her response. "Is that a problem? I know you're both retired, and you mentioned last Christmas that you didn't have any major plans for spring." Another glance between my parents. "It's just so soon," my father said. "And 2 whole weeks. The dates are flexible," I offered, feeling my excitement deflate slightly. "If you prefer a different time, I can try to reschedule, though. May is the perfect season for Hawaii." Rachel, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke. "Hawaii. I've always wanted to go to Hawaii." My mother turned to me with an expression I immediately recognized, the one that preceded asking me to accommodate Rachel's needs above my own. "Emily, this is such a thoughtful gift, but I was wondering—" She hesitated, glancing at Rachel. "Would you mind terribly if we took Rachel instead of you? She's been having such a difficult time with the breakup, and a vacation would be just what she needs to reset." The request hit me like a physical blow. I had spent a year planning and saving for this trip, imagining sharing their joy as they experienced their dream vacation, a vacation I had sacrificed my own travel plans to provide, and now they wanted to take Rachel instead. "You want Rachel to use my spot on the trip?" I repeated, needing to confirm I hadn't misunderstood. "You can afford to go to Hawaii anytime," my father added, as if this justified the request. "With your job and salary, you can travel wherever you want. Rachel doesn't have those opportunities." Rachel was already bouncing in her seat. "Oh my God, Hawaii! This is exactly what I need right now." I sat frozen, a lifetime of similar moments flashing through my mind. Science fair projects where Rachel received help while I worked alone. College application fees my parents couldn't afford for me, but found money for when Rachel applied. The constant expectation that I would understand, accommodate, step aside. "I designed this trip for you and Dad," I said carefully. "The suite has a king bed, and all the experiences are geared towards celebrating your 30 years of marriage." "Well, the bed situation might be tricky," my mother acknowledged, "but I'm sure the hotel could add a rollaway for Rachel. And while it's our anniversary, we'd enjoy it more knowing Rachel was having a good time too. You understand, don't you, Emily? You've always been the independent one." "Independent by necessity, not by choice." I thought bitterly. I should have said no. I should have explained how hurtful their request was. I should have stood up for myself and the significant gift I had created through personal sacrifice. Instead, I did what I had always done, swallowed my feelings, and accommodated the family dynamic. Of course, I said, my voice steady despite the tightness in my throat, if that's what would make you happy. My parents' relief was palpable, as was Rachel's excitement. She immediately began talking about what she would pack, what activities she wanted to do, what friends would be jealous of her Hawaiian photos. Not once, not a single time did anyone acknowledge what this change meant to me, or thank me for my flexibility. The conversation moved on, as if the matter was settled, my feelings irrelevant to the family equation as they had always been. I left earlier than planned that evening, claiming an early meeting the next day. As I drove home through gathering darkness, tears finally broke free. The perfect gift, the grand gesture that couldn't be minimized or overlooked, had been casually reshaped to exclude me and include Rachel. The familiar pain of being secondary in my own family cut deeper than ever, because I had foolishly expected this time to be different. I had never felt so alone, or so certain that something needed to change. The week following my gift presentation passed in a blur of painful revelations. What began as disappointment evolved into a deeper recognition of my family's entrenched patterns, as daily communications made the situation increasingly clear. My mother called the morning after dinner, launching immediately into logistical questions about the trip without acknowledging the change in plans. Emily, the resort information says breakfast is included, but does that mean just continental or the full buffet? And is the helicopter tour appropriate for someone with mild motion sickness? Rachel gets queasy sometimes. No thank you for the gift. No recognition of my feelings about their decision. Just practical questions focused entirely on their needs and Rachel's comfort. The breakfast is a full gourmet buffet, I answered mechanically. And the helicopter company offers non-drowsy motion sickness tablets if needed. Perfect, Rachel's so excited. She's already bought 3 new swimsuits. I managed polite responses while a knot formed in my stomach. 3 new swimsuits, Rachel's part-time barista job barely covered her rent. Where had that money come from? The answer came later that day when my father called about the spending money I had mentioned. About that spending account you set up, is there a way to access those funds before the trip? Rachel needs a few things and our monthly budget is a bit tight. They were using the vacation spending money I had saved to buy Rachel pre-trip clothing. Money intended for anniversary souvenirs and special meals was being redirected before they even departed. The account is specifically linked to the resort for charges during your stay. I lied, unwilling to fund Rachel's shopping spree. It can't be accessed beforehand. Later that evening, I met my best friend Sophia for dinner, finally sharing the full story of my gift and my parents' response. They did what? Sophia's outrage was gratifying after days of suppressing my own. After you spend a year planning their dream trip, they're taking your sister instead. That's beyond inconsiderate, Em. That's cruel. It's just how my family works, I said, pushing pasta around my plate without appetite. Rachel's needs always come first. This isn't about needs, Sophia argued. This is about your parents taking your incredible generosity for granted and your sister's entitlement. If I were you, I'd cancel the whole thing. I couldn't do that, I protested, though the thought had crossed my mind. They'd never forgive me. And you should forgive this, Sophia challenged. This pattern will never change if you keep accepting it. I dismissed the suggestion, but Sophia's words lingered. That night I found myself looking through old photos, seeing clear evidence of the family dynamic in countless images Rachel centered and highlighted me on the periphery or behind the camera. Birthday parties where my gifts were practical, while Rachel's were extravagant. Family vacations, where Rachel's preferences dictated activities. The next morning, a text from Rachel herself pushed me closer to my breaking point. Hey, Em, the resort website shows some amazing shops. Can you add another 1,000 to that spending account? I want to bring back gifts for friends. I stared at the message in disbelief. Not only was she taking my place on the trip I had planned and paid for, but she was now requesting additional funds for shopping. No thank you. No acknowledgement of my sacrifice. Just entitlement. I declined politely. Sorry, the budget is fixed. The spending account is specifically for Mom and Dad's anniversary expenses. Her response was immediate and indignant. Don't be stingy. You can afford it. Not everyone makes your kind of money. Before I could respond, an Instagram notification appeared. Rachel had posted a series of shopping bags with the caption, Hawaii prep, Can't wait for my parents to take me on this amazing vacation. Blessed, island bound, need more tank tops. My hands shook as I read the caption. My parents taking her on vacation. No mention that it was a gift I had provided. No acknowledgement of my role whatsoever. Later that day, while checking the resort reservation to ensure everything remained in order, I discovered something that crystallized my decision. My parents had contacted the resort directly, adding a fourth person to the booking: Rachel's new boyfriend, Kyle, the supposedly heartbreaking ex who was apparently no longer an ex. Not only had they replaced me with Rachel, but they had also taken it upon themselves to add her boyfriend to the luxury anniversary trip I was funding. When I called the resort to confirm, I learned they had requested a room upgrade to accommodate the additional guest, casually telling the concierge to charge any difference to our daughter's card. The final confirmation came through an accidental discovery. While on the phone discussing a work matter with my mother's friend Judith, I overheard my mother in the background, unaware I was on the line. "We're so excited about Hawaii," my mother was saying. "Rachel deserves this break after everything she's been through. The resort looks amazing, oceanfront suite, private dinners, the works. Just what she needs to get over Kyle, though, now they're back together and he's coming too. It'll be like a second honeymoon for them." Not a word about their anniversary. Not a mention of my name or my gift. In their minds, this had transformed from an anniversary celebration I had sacrificed to provide into a vacation they were generously giving Rachel. That evening, I sat in my apartment with Sophia, emotionally exhausted, but finally clear about what I needed to do. "They've gone too far," I admitted. Adding Rachel was painful enough, but inviting her boyfriend without even asking me, planning to upgrade the room at my expense, using the trip to support their relationship, all while erasing my role completely. "I can't do this anymore." "So what's your plan?" Sophia asked, her expression sympathetic but determined. "I'm going to wait until they're in the air," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt now that the decision was made. "Then I'm canceling everything." The morning of my parents' departure dawned clear and bright, contrasting sharply with my turbulent emotions. I had barely slept, alternating between certainty about my decision and anxiety about its consequences. My phone chimed with a text from my mother. "We're heading to the airport in an hour. Any chance you could drive us? The airport parking is so expensive." I stared at the message in disbelief. After everything, they were now asking me to drive them to the airport for the vacation they had hijacked. The irony was almost comedic. "Sorry, I have meetings all morning that can't be rescheduled," I replied, which was actually true. "I can arrange an Uber for you if that helps." The response came quickly. "An Uber all the way to the airport? That must cost a fortune. We'll just drive ourselves. Dad's not happy about the parking fees, though." The complaint about parking fees, a minor expense, compared to the $15,000 vacation I was providing, reinforced my resolve. I arranged and paid for the Uber anyway, sending them confirmation with a simple "safe travels" message. At work, I found it impossible to concentrate. I excused myself from one meeting, claiming a migraine, and retreated to my office where I could monitor my parents' flight status online. The flight was scheduled for 11:45 a.m., with boarding beginning at 11:15. At 10:30, my phone rang with my mother's number. "Emily, we're at the airport. Rachel's checked bag was overweight, and they want to charge us $75. Can you believe the nerve? Can you call the airline and see if they'll waive it since you booked the tickets?" I had specifically booked tickets with a generous baggage allowance. Rachel must have packed an enormous amount to exceed the limit. "I can't call right now," I said. "Just pay the fee and keep the receipt. We can figure it out when you get back." An hour later, I received the airport check-in notification I had arranged with the airline. They had boarded. Soon after, Rachel posted a pre-takeoff selfie with our parents, and Kyle all smiling excitedly with the caption, "Hawaii-bound first class would have been nice, but beggars can't be choosers. Had vacation, had aloha." I checked the flight status one final time. Departed. They were officially in the air halfway across the country, and unable to communicate for the next 6 hours. It was time. With hands that trembled slightly despite my resolve, I began the cancellation process I had researched meticulously. First, I called the resort. "Hello, I need to cancel a reservation." I began providing the necessary details to the customer service representative. "Ms. Mitchell, this is a non-refundable reservation at this point. Your party is scheduled to check in today." "I understand it's non-refundable," I replied. "I still need to cancel it." There was a pause. "May I ask why you're canceling so last minute? Is there a problem we can help resolve?" Something in the representative's tone, genuine concern rather than corporate script, broke through my carefully maintained composure. The reservation was a 30th anniversary gift for my parents, I explained, voice cracking slightly. I spent a year saving for it. When I gave them the gift, they asked if my sister could go instead of me. Then they added her boyfriend without asking. They're currently flying to Hawaii expecting everything to be perfect, but they've completely excluded me from a gift I sacrificed to give them. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. I understand, the representative finally said, her voice softening. I'm going to connect you with our customer relations manager. One moment, please. The manager, Michael, listened to my story with professional sympathy. I'm very sorry about your situation, Ms. Mitchell. While we can cancel the reservation as requested, we do have a partial refund option available for extraordinary circumstances, which I believe this qualifies for. I hadn't expected a refund possibility. What would that entail? We can refund approximately 30% of the reservation cost, which would be applied back to your original payment method. The cancellation would be processed immediately, meaning the room would not be available when your family arrives. I considered this briefly. Please process the cancellation, but I don't want the refund. You don't want the refund? Michael sounded confused. No. Please donate it to your staff appreciation fund or a local Hawaiian charity instead. After the resort cancellation was confirmed, I methodically worked through the rest of the itinerary: the sunset dinner, the helicopter tour, the luau experience, the photography session, the rental car. Each vendor expressed surprise at the last-minute cancellation, but none offered the sympathetic understanding of the resort manager. The rental car company was particularly difficult. Ma'am, they've probably already landed and will be expecting to pick up their vehicle. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm sure, I replied, growing emotionally numb with each cancellation. Finally, I withdrew the spending money from the special vacation account I had established, returning it to my personal savings. The entire cancellation process took less than an hour, erasing a year of planning and saving with remarkable efficiency. The last step was the hardest. I composed an email to my parents scheduling it to deliver precisely when their plane was scheduled to land, Mom and Dad. By the time you read this, you will have discovered that all reservations associated with the Hawaiian vacation have been canceled. There is no resort booking, no rental car, no activities, and no spending account. I spent a year saving and planning to give you the anniversary gift you deserved. When you asked to take Rachel instead of me, it hurt deeply, but I reluctantly agreed because I wanted you to be happy. When you added Kyle without consulting me, upgraded the room at my expense, and began describing the trip as something you were providing for Rachel rather than a gift I gave you, it became clear how little you value my contribution to this family. This pattern has existed my entire life. My achievements are minimized while Rachel's mediocrity is celebrated. My financial support is accepted without acknowledgement, while your resources are directed toward Rachel's wants. My feelings are considered secondary or irrelevant to the family equation. I recognize that canceling the trip is an extreme response, but it represents a boundary I should have established long ago. Our relationship needs to change fundamentally if it is to continue at all. I'll be unavailable by phone for the next several days. I suggest you use your return tickets to come home, and we can discuss this when everyone has had time to process their feelings. Emily. I scheduled the email, turned off my phone, and finally allowed myself to cry, not just for the ruined vacation, but for decades of feeling invisible in my own family. 6 hours later, I turned my phone back on, bracing myself for the inevitable fallout. The notification count was alarming: 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, and numerous social media alerts. I started with voicemails, working chronologically through what had clearly been an emotional roller coaster for my family. My mother's first message, time-stamped shortly after their landing. Emily, there seems to be some mistake with the resort. They're saying they have no reservation for us. Please call immediately. Her second message, 30 minutes later. Emily, we've tried calling the resort number in the folder and they're saying everything was canceled. Kyle is trying to find alternate accommodations, but it's peak season and everything is either booked or incredibly expensive. Please call us back urgently. Her third message shifted from confusion to dawning realization. Did you do this? Did you cancel everything? Call me right now, Emily. I don't understand what's happening. My father, who rarely left voicemails, had recorded an uncharacteristically emotional message. Emily, this is your father. If you've done what it appears you've done, I don't even know what to say. We're stranded at the airport with no reservations and nowhere to go. How could you do this to your sister, to your mother on our anniversary? I never thought you could be this vindictive. Call us immediately. Rachel's voicemail was hysterical. You complete psycho, you've ruined everything. Do you know how embarrassing it was standing there while they told us everything was canceled? Kyle is threatening to fly back home because the only hotel we could find is some gross motel miles from the beach. I hope you're happy with yourself, you jealous, spiteful bitch. The text messages followed a similar progression from confusion to anger. Extended family members had also begun weighing in, having apparently been informed of the situation. Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, had sent a particularly cutting message. I always thought you were the responsible one, Emily. This vindictive behavior confirms what your mother has said about you always being difficult and jealous of your sister. Truly disappointed. The family group chat had exploded with messages most condemning my actions without any understanding of the context. Only my younger cousin Jamie had sent a private message of qualified support. Don't know the whole story, but guessing there's more to this than what Aunt Carol is saying. Hope you're okay. Among the digital chaos was an email from my mother detailing their experience upon arrival. They had stood at the resort's front desk, confirmation documents in hand, only to be informed that the entire reservation had been canceled hours earlier. The luxury property was fully booked, as were most accommodations on that part of the island during peak season. They had spent hours calling hotels before finding a basic motel 20 minutes from the beach, at 3 times its usual rate, still significantly less luxurious than the resort I had booked, but depleting much of my parents' limited savings. Kyle apparently had been furious about the downgrade and was considering returning home early, adding to Rachel's distress. My mother's email concluded with, "I don't understand how you could do this to us. What kind of daughter deliberately strands her family thousands of miles from home? We're beyond hurt and disappointed. Your father hasn't stopped shaking with anger. If this is about taking Rachel instead of you could have just said something instead of this cruel stunt." That last line struck me particularly hard. You could have just said something. As if expressing my feelings had ever been welcomed or acknowledged in our family dynamic. As if I hadn't spent a lifetime swallowing disappointment to accommodate their preferences. The most surprising communication came from my father, a separate email with a markedly different tone than his angry voicemail. Emily, while your mother drafts another email, I wanted to reach out separately. What you did was extreme and has caused significant hardship. However, I find myself wondering what drove you to this point. You've always been our steady, reliable daughter. Something about this situation clearly pushed you beyond your usual restraint. When things settle, I'd like to understand your perspective better. Dad. This unexpected outreach gave me a momentary spark of hope that at least one family member might be open to honest communication. However, that hope was quickly extinguished by his follow-up email just 20 minutes later. Upon further reflection, I need to ask if you're planning to reimburse us for the emergency accommodations and rental car we've had to arrange. Your actions have cost us over $4,000 already, which is a significant portion of our retirement savings. We expect full repayment plus compensation for the emotional distress you've caused Rachel, who had to be prescribed anti-anxiety medication by a local doctor. The brief glimpse of understanding had been quickly overtaken by financial concerns and continued prioritization of Rachel's feelings. I decided to take a personal day from work to process these emotions and consult with my therapist, Dr. Myers, whom I had been seeing monthly for general stress management. She agreed to an emergency session that afternoon. What you did was certainly dramatic, Dr. Myers observed after I recounted the situation in detail. And while I understand the depth of hurt that motivated this action, I wonder if you've considered the potential long-term consequences. I know they'll be angry, I acknowledged, but maybe now they'll finally understand how their behavior affects me. Perhaps, she said thoughtfully. Though shock and disruption don't always lead to introspection, sometimes they just entrench defensive positions. We discussed healthier boundary-setting approaches, and whether my cancellation response, while emotionally satisfying in the moment, might ultimately undermine my goal of establishing more respectful family relationships. The question isn't whether your feelings were valid, they absolutely were. Dr. Myers emphasized, the question is whether this particular expression of those feelings will lead to the outcome you're hoping for. This perspective gave me pause. While I didn't regret establishing a boundary, the method had perhaps created unnecessary trauma. I decided to offer partial reimbursement for their emergency accommodations as a gesture of good faith, transferring $2,000 to my father's account with a brief message, to help with unexpected expenses. We can discuss the full situation when you return. The response was immediate and disappointing. This doesn't begin to cover what your vindictive stunt has cost us financially or emotionally. Rachel is traumatized and considering therapy. We expect full reimbursement plus compensation for emotional damages, or we'll be forced to consider legal options. The threat of legal action, as baseless as it might be, considering I had canceled my own gift, crystallized the reality of our family dynamic. Even now, they were framing the situation entirely around their inconvenience, and Rachel's feelings with no acknowledgement of the original hurt that had prompted my actions. I decided to maintain radio silence for the remainder of their trip, giving everyone space to process emotions before attempting further communication. 2 weeks after the Hawaii incident, the initial crisis had evolved into a more complex family estrangement. My parents and Rachel had returned from their abbreviated Hawaiian vacation 3 days early, citing the substandard accommodations and emotional distress as reasons for cutting the trip short. Daily text messages continued to arrive, oscillating between guilt-inducing pleas and angry demands. My mother's approach focused on family obligation. How could you do this to people who raised you and gave you everything? My father's messages centered on financial restitution. We're still waiting for full repayment of our expenses. Rachel's communications were simply abusive, filled with name-calling and accusations. Extended family members had largely sided with my parents, having heard only their version of events. Thanksgiving plans were already being discussed with explicit mentions of my exclusion, unless I made appropriate amends. Through this difficult period, I maintained my normal work routine while processing the complex emotions of family estrangement. My colleagues noticed my subdued mood, and during a team lunch, my department head Jennifer gently inquired if everything was all right. Something about her genuine concern broke through my practiced composure. I found myself sharing an abbreviated version of the situation, expecting professional discomfort or judgment. Instead, Jennifer and several other colleagues offered stories of their own family dynamics that paralleled aspects of mine. My brother was always my parents' priority, Jennifer shared. It took moving 2,000 miles away and 3 years of therapy for me to stop seeking their approval. Another colleague, Marcus, nodded in recognition. In my family, it was academic achievement that determined worth. When I chose a creative career instead of medicine like my sisters, I was effectively demoted in the family hierarchy. These conversations helped me recognize that my situation, while painful, wasn't unusual. Many people struggle with family dynamics that undervalue their contributions or dismiss their feelings. The difference was how they had established boundaries to protect their emotional well-being, something I was only beginning to learn. My therapy sessions with Dr. Myers intensified, focusing on the lifelong pattern of seeking parental approval that had shaped my behavior. You've spent your entire adult life trying to earn the recognition your sister receives automatically, Dr. Myers observed. Financial support, career achievements, this elaborate vacation, all attempts to finally receive the validation you've been seeking since childhood. Is that so wrong? I asked defensively. To want your parents to be proud of you. Not wrong, she clarified, but potentially harmful when it becomes a pattern of diminishing your own needs to earn conditional love. The question is whether their approval is worth the cost to your self-worth. These sessions helped me recognize the unhealthy financial dynamic I had established with my family, using money as a substitute for emotional connection, providing support that was accepted without acknowledgement, while they continued directing their limited resources toward Rachel. As I worked through these revelations, a surprising communication arrived from Rachel, an actual letter delivered to my apartment, rather than a text or email. The handwritten note represented uncharacteristic effort on her part. Emily, I'm still angry about Hawaii, but Kyle says I should try to see things from your perspective. I guess it wasn't cool for Mom and Dad to ask you to give up your spot on a trip you paid for, and maybe we shouldn't have added Kyle without asking. I don't fully get why you went nuclear instead of just saying something, but whatever. If you want to talk, I'm around. But I'm still mad about having to stay in that gross motel with cockroaches. Rachel. The letter, while far from a genuine apology, represented Rachel's first acknowledgement that my perspective might have some validity. I responded with a measured email suggesting coffee the following week, establishing new terms for our relationship. I appreciate your letter. I'm open to meeting, but I want to be clear about something first. Our relationship needs to change. I won't be providing financial support anymore, not for you, not for Mom and Dad. Love and money have become unhealthily entangled in our family, and I'm establishing this boundary for everyone's benefit. Rachel's response was predictably defensive, but not entirely dismissive. Fine, be that way. Not like I asked for your money anyway. Coffee next Tuesday at Magnolia's. The scheduled coffee meeting never happened. 3 days before our planned meeting, my parents reached out with their own attempt at reconciliation, an invitation to Sunday dinner, with the explicit expectation to put this unfortunate episode behind us and move forward as a family. The phrasing suggested they viewed the entire situation as a temporary disruption, rather than a fundamental problem requiring acknowledgement and change. Still, I accepted the invitation, recognizing it as a necessary step in the process, though I asked Sophia to be on standby for moral support if needed. The family dinner was as tense as expected. My mother had prepared all my childhood favorites, an obvious attempt at emotional manipulation that might have worked in the past. My father maintained a stiff formality, while Rachel alternated between sullen silence and barbed comments. After an awkward meal, my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. Emily, while what happened in Hawaii was perhaps inconsiderate on our part, your response was completely disproportionate and hurtful to everyone involved. The phrasing, perhaps inconsiderate, minimized their actions, while emphasizing my supposed overreaction. I understand how it appeared from your perspective. I responded carefully. But this wasn't about just Hawaii. This was about a lifetime of feeling secondary in this family. Secondary, my mother interjected. We've always treated you and Rachel exactly the same. Mom, that's simply not true, I said quietly. Rachel's needs and wants have always come before mine. My achievements are acknowledged briefly while Rachel's smallest efforts are celebrated. I've provided financial support to this family for years, with barely a thank you, while you continue using your limited resources to bail Rachel out of her latest situation. That's not fair, my mother protested. Rachel needed more support. You were always so capable, so independent. I became independent because I had to, I explained. That wasn't a personality trait, it was adaptation to being left to manage on my own, while family resources were directed toward Rachel. Rachel surprisingly remained quiet during this exchange, watching with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. My father shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we haven't always been perfectly balanced in our attention, but that doesn't justify what you did. Do you know how embarrassing it was standing at that resort counter being told everything had been canceled? I imagine it felt similar to spending a year planning a special gift only to be told I wasn't wanted on the trip, I countered. For the first time, my father appeared to truly consider my perspective. I hadn't thought of it that way, he admitted slowly. This small acknowledgement, however limited, represented the first genuine listening I had experienced from my parents in years. The conversation that followed wasn't perfect. My mother continued defending their actions, and Rachel eventually stormed out when the discussion turned to her financial dependence, but it represented a first step toward honest communication. As the evening concluded, no perfect resolution had been reached, but a foundation for potential change had been established. My father, in a moment of unexpected vulnerability, asked quietly as I prepared to leave, "Have we really made you feel secondary your entire life?" "Yes," I answered simply. "You have." The look of genuine recognition in his eyes suggested that perhaps after decades of emotional blindness, he was finally beginning to see. 6 months after the Hawaii incident that had upended our family dynamic, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen preparing brunch. The countertops I had saved for were finally installed, transforming the space into the bright, functional cooking area I had envisioned. This renovation, a gift to myself using funds originally earmarked for future family support, symbolized my commitment to the new boundaries I had established. The doorbell rang precisely at 11. My father stood outside punctual as always, holding a small potted orchid. These Sunday brunches had become our new tradition, a neutral space to rebuild our relationship without the complicated dynamics of full family gatherings. "The place looks great," he commented, noticing the kitchen upgrades. "The countertops really brighten the space." "Thanks, they were worth waiting for," I replied, accepting the orchid with genuine appreciation. These small gifts, thoughtful rather than extravagant, represented his efforts to show attention to my preferences, a significant shift from past interactions. My relationship with my parents had transformed dramatically over the past 6 months. After the painful but necessary conversations following Hawaii, we had established new patterns of interaction based on more honest communication and clearer boundaries. The most significant change was financial. I had formally ended the monthly support I had provided for years, explaining that while I was happy to help in genuine emergencies, regular financial assistance had created unhealthy expectations and resentment. My parents' initial resistance had given way to grudging acceptance, and eventually a surprising outcome: they had downsized to a smaller house that better fit their retirement budget. "Your mother settled in well at the new place," my father commented as we sat down to eat. "She's joined a neighborhood gardening club. I think having less house to maintain has been good for her." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied sincerely. My relationship with my mother remained more strained than with my father. Her difficulty acknowledging past patterns made deeper reconciliation challenging, but small steps of progress were evident in her decreased references to Rachel and increased interest in my life. Rachel herself represented the most complex aspect of our family's evolution. After several months of angry messages and attempts to circumvent my financial boundaries by asking for loans rather than gifts, she had faced a housing crisis when her landlord raised her rent. With no family bailout forthcoming, she had been forced to find a roommate and a second part-time job. Rachel's sticking with the bookstore job. My father noted a hint of surprise in his voice. "3 months now. I think it's the longest she's held a position since college." "That's good," I acknowledged. "How's she handling the roommate situation?" "Some adjustment challenges," he admitted. "But she's managing. I think having to solve her own problems has been difficult, but ultimately beneficial." This represented significant growth in my father's perspective. Previously, he would have described any of Rachel's struggles as unfair hardships requiring family intervention. Now, he was beginning to recognize the value of Rachel developing self-sufficiency, something he had never expected of her before. My mother's adjustment to the new family dynamic had been more difficult. She still occasionally made comments suggesting I was being unnecessarily harsh with Rachel, but these had decreased as Rachel demonstrated unexpected resilience in the face of actual consequences. "Your mother mentioned you helped Rachel with her resume," my father said, refilling his coffee cup. "I did," I confirmed. "That's something I'm happy to offer: skills and knowledge rather than financial bailouts." This represented my own growth. I had initially withdrawn completely from Rachel's life, hurt and angry over years of imbalance. Over time, I had found a middle path, supporting her efforts toward independence while maintaining firm boundaries around finances. The greatest change, however, was in my own perspective. Through continued therapy and honest reflection, I had gradually released the desperate need for parental validation that had driven so many of my choices. My career advancement, financial decisions, and personal goals were now guided by my own values, rather than the hope of finally earning recognition from my family. The award I had received last month for innovative financial strategies had been celebrated with friends and colleagues rather than presented to my parents as evidence of my worth. When I had mentioned it casually during a phone call, my mother had actually asked interested questions about the project, rather than immediately turning the conversation to Rachel's latest endeavors, a small but meaningful shift. As my father prepared to leave after brunch, he paused at the door. "I've been meaning to ask, are you still planning to go to Hawaii?" The question surprised me. In the aftermath of the canceled family trip, I had impulsively booked a solo Hawaiian vacation for myself, reclaiming the destination as a personal experience rather than a failed family gift. I had mentioned it only once months ago. "Yes," I confirmed. "I leave next month, actually." He nodded thoughtfully. "I hope you have a wonderful time. You deserve it." The simple acknowledgement that I deserved enjoyment, that my experiences had value, might have seemed minor to an outsider. But in the context of our family history, it represented profound growth. Later that evening, as I finalized details for my upcoming trip, I reflected on the painful but necessary journey of the past 6 months. The Hawaii incident had been a breaking point, forcing uncomfortable truths into the open after decades of unhealthy patterns. While our family relationships remained works in progress with occasional relapses into old dynamics, the foundation had shifted toward greater honesty and respect. My parents were learning to see me as an individual with valid feelings, rather than simply the strong one who would always accommodate family expectations. Rachel was developing self-sufficiency previously untapped, and I was learning that family love needn't be earned through grand gestures or financial support, that healthy relationships required mutual respect, rather than constant sacrifice. The Hawaiian vacation I would soon enjoy alone symbolized this transformation. What had begun as a gift intended to finally earn parental recognition had become a gift to myself, a celebration of my worth independent of family validation. As I confirmed my beachfront dinner reservation table for one sunset view, I recognized that sometimes the healthiest form of love is setting boundaries that allow everyone to grow, even when the process is painful. The family dynamic that had shaped my life for 32 years hadn't changed overnight, but the patterns had been disrupted, creating space for new, healthier connections based on authenticity rather than obligation. The path forward wasn't perfect or clearly defined, but it was finally mine to determine a journey guided by self-respect, rather than the endless quest for approval that had driven me for so long. The Hawaiian sunrise painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as I walked along the shoreline, coffee in hand, enjoying the solitude of early morning before other tourists emerged. After 5 days at the same resort, I had originally booked for my parents. I had fallen into a peaceful rhythm of beach walks, adventure activities, and quiet evenings, enjoying spectacular sunsets. This solo vacation, reclaiming the destination that had become symbolic of my family's struggle, had proven more healing than I could have anticipated. Away from daily responsibilities and familiar settings, I found space to reflect on the significant changes of the past year and solidify the lessons learned through that difficult process. My phone chimed with a message notification. A year ago, a vacation would have been constantly interrupted by family demands and emergencies requiring my attention or financial intervention. Now, with clearer boundaries established, my family respected my time away. The message was from Sophia, checking in, not a crisis requiring resolution. As I settled into a beach chair later that morning, I considered how profoundly my relationships had evolved since the canceled family trip 6 months earlier. The journey hadn't been smooth or linear, with progress often followed by frustrating relapses into old patterns, but the overall trajectory had moved steadily toward healthier dynamics. My relationship with my father had improved most significantly. Our Sunday brunches had become genuine opportunities for connection rather than obligation. He had begun asking thoughtful questions about my work and interests, showing authentic curiosity about my life, rather than perfunctory acknowledgement before shifting to Rachel-centered conversations. More importantly, he had started recognizing and addressing the family patterns that had shaped our relationships for decades. During a particularly meaningful conversation, he had admitted, "I think we relied on your strength too much. We took for granted that you would always be okay, because you seemed so capable." This acknowledgement that being perceived as strong had actually resulted in receiving less support and recognition represented significant growth in his understanding of our family dynamic. My mother's evolution had been slower and more inconsistent. She struggled to recognize how her different treatment of Rachel and me had affected our development and relationships. However, small changes were evident in her behavior. She had begun acknowledging my accomplishments without immediately comparing them to Rachel's situation. Our phone conversations occasionally ended without any mention of my sister, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The most dramatic transformation had occurred with Rachel. Faced with actual consequences for her choices without family bailouts, she had discovered resources and resilience previously untapped. The part-time bookstore job had evolved into a manager position with increasing responsibilities. Her shared apartment arrangement, initially described as a temporary hardship, had become a stable living situation, with unexpected benefits. 3 weeks ago, Rachel had reached out with a surprising request. "Can we have coffee? I want your advice on something." Over coffee at a local cafe, she had shared her interest in pursuing a business certificate program at the community college. "I know I've bounced around a lot career-wise," she admitted with unusual self-awareness, "but I think I finally found something that fits at the bookstore." The owner mentioned possible advancement opportunities if I had some business background. Instead of asking for tuition money, as I had expected, Rachel wanted guidance navigating financial aid applications and creating a budget that would allow her to work reduced hours while taking classes. The conversation represented our first interaction as equal adults, rather than the established pattern of entitled younger sister and accommodating elder one. "I know things have been weird between us," Rachel had acknowledged awkwardly, "but I've been thinking about what you said about our family patterns, and maybe you weren't entirely wrong." Coming from Rachel, this qualified admission represented significant growth. When I suggested resources rather than offering financial assistance, she had accepted the boundary without protest, another small but meaningful shift. As the Hawaiian afternoon sun warmed the pristine beach, I reflected on how my own perspective had transformed most profoundly. The constant hunger for parental approval that had driven so many of my choices had diminished significantly. I had released the belief that if I achieved enough, gave enough, or sacrificed enough, I would finally receive the recognition and appreciation I craved. This liberation from approval seeking had affected every aspect of my life. At work, I had begun pursuing projects that genuinely interested me, rather than those most likely to earn external validation. In personal relationships, I had grown more authentic and less accommodating, expressing my needs and preferences, rather than automatically deferring to others. My financial decisions now prioritized my own security and enjoyment, rather than providing support that enabled unhealthy family patterns. The kitchen renovation this Hawaiian vacation and the investment portfolio I had strengthened all represented investments in myself, a concept that would have seemed selfish a year ago, but now felt like necessary self-care. The canceled family vacation, an action that had seemed extreme and vindictive in the moment, had ultimately served as the catalyst for these positive changes. While I wouldn't necessarily recommend such a dramatic boundary-setting approach to others, I couldn't deny that it had disrupted destructive patterns that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. That evening, as I enjoyed a private beachfront dinner similar to the one I had originally planned for my parents' anniversary, my phone chimed with an unexpected message. My father had sent a photo of a small cake with "Enjoy Hawaii" written in icing, accompanied by a simple text: "Your mother baked this today. We're both thinking of you and hope you're having a wonderful time." The gesture, modest compared to the elaborate vacation I had once planned for them, but genuine in its acknowledgement of my experience, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Not because I still desperately needed their approval, but because it represented authentic connection, without the unhealthy patterns that had characterized our relationship for so long. As the server brought the dessert I had ordered, I requested a second spoon and took a photo of the elegant chocolate creation. I sent it to my parents with the message, "Wish you could share this with me. Thank you for thinking of me today." This simple exchange, neither burdened by past resentments nor clouded by unrealistic expectations, felt like the most genuine connection we had shared in years. Not perfect, not complete, but honest and untethered from the dysfunctional patterns that had defined our relationship for decades. Tomorrow, I would snorkel at a secluded cove, hike to a hidden waterfall, and enjoy a sunset boat cruise, all experiences I had once planned for my parents, but now embraced for myself. The painful journey that had brought me to this peaceful beach had ultimately led to something unexpected. Not just healthier family relationships, but a stronger, more authentic relationship with myself. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your generosity for granted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. How did you balance maintaining relationships while protecting your own well-being? If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and personal growth. Don't forget to share with anyone who might be struggling with similar situations. Sometimes knowing others have walked this path can provide comfort during difficult times. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is establish healthy boundaries even when it's painful.